Alrighty. Well, hello there. Welcome to Holy Moonlight Crusaders. I am J. Dylan Proctor, the Nazarene Preacher Man. We're going to be picking up in Resident Evil 4. And I really think I've pegged the worldview of this game so far, what the story is telling us. And it's very similar to a lot of things that go on in our world. I think you can sum up this game to a metaphor for the mobs that go on in our world. The mob mentality where people, they give up their individual existence, they give up their personal attributes, they cease to be a person who makes decisions for themselves, and they just become part of a mob. They become an NPC. And this oftentimes happens because something takes possession of people, a lot like a demon might take possession of people. And in the case of Resident Evil, you've actually got this kind of virus. It's kind of unclear what it's like in this game. I know it was injected in Leon, this other girl. And it's injected from a cult, a group of people who they sit up in their castle on an ivory tower, and they inject it into all the villagers and townsfolk beneath them. And the villagers and townsfolk, they all look alike. They all, you know, they're basically recycled NPCs by this point. And that's what happens in our world. We get fed information, things whip people up into a mob. You get controlled by a few people who think they're better than everybody else, even though they're not. And it causes people to lose their personal attributes. This is really relevant to what's going on in the world right now. Like, as I'm doing this, there's a lot of riots and protests going on here in America. And I say riots first and protests. There are some legitimate protests going on for the George Floyd death, but the overwhelming majority of what we see happening across this nation that's being put out online is a spirit that is trying to possess people and manipulate people. There is a spirit of this age, and I know I quote 2 Corinthians 4:4 all the time. The God of this age is blinding the hearts of unbelievers, so they won't see the radiating illumination of the gospel of Christ Jesus, who is the image of God. There's a spirit taking possession of people where they won't see truth. Now, one of the ways that this spirit, which is everywhere, it's the predominant reaction to this is affecting people, is it's causing them to riot. It's causing them to loot. Now, I don't know how much of the riot and looting is going on out there, because I know that a lot of these things are manipulated, though I know there's a whole lot of it. People destroying their own towns, destroying their own businesses and things of that nature that they tend to. But it's done because of a larger evil that I see affecting our culture. And I've kind of phrased this whole conversation like I have for a particular reason. There is something infecting people. Just like in this game, there's something that infects the mind, takes possession of people. There's something infecting people in our world where they can't see truth. So with the George Floyd situation, and if you're not familiar with it, depending on whenever you watch this, you know, I kind of hate that I don't talk about this rather than just the game, but games and stories, they're metaphors for things going on in life. So yeah. Poor George Floyd, he was killed after a cop put his knee on him. I think George Floyd had tried to pay using like a $20 counterfeit dollar bill, $20 bill. Which again, that's not good. That's not how the police should be interacting with people. It's not necessarily a given that it was because he was black. I'm not here to read people's minds. But the whole notion that America is inherently racist, if that were the case, you know, we wouldn't be reacting like we were. It would be perfectly fine for a cop to do that. The fact that it's a big media spectacle, anytime something like this happens, shows that America is not what it was in the past. People don't even realize that the narrative they're being fed is proof that America is nowhere. Race itself isn't a causal factor to the degree that people want to make it out to be. Suffering is inherent to life. The world is not a utopia. We're living on this side of Eden. But there is a legitimate concern. A lot of people, they are frustrated with the system from a lot of different angles. You see things go on with Michael Flynn. You see all this stuff happen, and there's a lot of reasons to be frustrated. But When you're frustrated that there's a cult living in a castle up above you, turning into a zombie doesn't fix that problem. People rioting and protesting, burning down buildings, that's not going to make the world better. That's not going to sanctify you. That's not going to save you. And for all those out there in the church who want to virtue signal and say, well, you know, they're right to be angry, you're not helping the situation. If you have a child that's acting badly, and you say, well, we're not going to discipline the child, that's not going to make the child a better adult. And what we're dealing with right now are adults, and they deserve to be treated on a higher order thinking level than just to talk down to them like they're not adults. But at the same time, they need to be held accountable. And just like the police need to be held accountable, everyone who does something sinful needs to be held accountable. I mean, of course, God is the one who ultimately will hold us accountable. But here on this earth, we have to be advancing things of righteousness and holiness and putting an end to as many unrighteous things as we can. So, anyone out there saying it's okay, this is how they have to do this, no, they don't. And you're lying to yourself if you think that this is going to make everything better than rioting. That's not going to unify people allowing a riot to happen. And I get that there's a carnal nature inside all of us. There's a sin nature that's a little bit like the Joker that likes to watch the world burn. But Resident Evil very much is a metaphor for what's going on right now in our world. You've got a small group of people who think they're special, but you know, it's going to be crude. It takes the same amount of bullets to kill somebody in the cult as it does a zombie in the mob. But the cult thinks that they're better. They live up in their castle. They're looking down. It's not, you know, their castle that's the village. And the village people, there's a distinction between these two groups. The village people, like this guy here, is kind of made into this. This is not how God wants you to live. God doesn't want you to become a zombie. And God certainly doesn't want to put you in a position where you have to be taken out by Leon. So, that's where we're at in the world. It's sad. Yeah, like, making the excuse that it's okay just for the zombies to be zombies. And it really, regardless of what narrative you would line up with, because again, there's narrative casting galore. Even if you say there's systematic racism, you're still admitting there's something possessing people causing them to do this. And it still doesn't make sense for you to say it's okay for zombies to be zombies because something made them do that. That's horrible. That's so evil. You don't want people to be reduced to being zombies. And I'm pretty sure earlier in the game when you would shoot people, they would drop their weapon. And you dropped it then. I guess because he got dropped. So anyways, I hope anyone's out there in the chat. Please send me your thoughts, questions, and comments. And video games, they are meant to be sort of a form of escapism. Though a good, well-made video game can have a very serious worldview in it. And I wish there was some way for me to share this on Facebook while it was actually live. I don't know. If anyone knows that, the secrets on how to do that, send in your advice to me. I would greatly appreciate it. Uh-oh. Did Leon just die? No, he did not. For every minute I want to criticize Leon, he actually pulls something off pretty tough. Alright, where's the chainsaw man? We hear the chainsaw man. There he is. Don't know if that did any real damage or not. I used to think that there were critical points where you could do critical damage, like a headshot. And I was fairly convinced of that, but shooting him is starting to make me doubt it. Alrighty. We're gonna see if we can shoot this. Oh goodness. Alright, we need something a little bit more serious, don't we? Alright, that should drop them all. Almost. Alright, we're gonna have to get something else out. Ooh, we don't have much ammo at all. Oh, phone call on the phone. Just I'll get back to that. Okay, well, here we are. I am going to try to post this. I don't know if it'll let it take something live there or not. Okay, so it looks like it's there. And for everybody watching, I'm going to, if you're out there, just please give me a second. I'm trying to post this. All right. We're going to try this. Okay. And sorry, the unfortunate deal with live streams is it's live. Okay. All right. Well, continuing on where we were. We're good. Okay, so here we go. Continuing on. So if anyone does join in the chat, if you'll scroll back towards the beginning, I go a little bit more in depth. This is a great place to come in. The Chops Head Clean Off Simulator. So, Resident Evil 4 is the game we're playing. We've been playing it for quite a while. It kind of falls into the category of a zombie Though it also follows the model of a hero saving the princess, who in this case is the daughter of a president. So there's an idea of a man kind of saving Adam saving Eve to an extent, though there's not really a romantic tension between the two, but there's still something there about how things are going on. And in this, it's put in the framework of a bunch of zombies that used to be townspeople. And I really think this is a great metaphor for where we're at, because these people, they didn't just become zombies out of nowhere. Again, there's this cult that has a castle, presumably up on a hill somewhere. I haven't quite seen how the landscape plays out, but it's implied to be up high with its towers and stuff. You've got this elite group of people who are in a cult, and they fan the flames on this virus/parasite which comes to infect people and possess them. They lose their individuality, they lose their unique characteristics, the things that make them really human, and they become NPCs. They don't really think for themselves, they're just part of a mob. And this is something which has happened all throughout history. You see mobs are always bad, and with the situation with George Floyd, we have a lot of people turning into mobs, and that's not good. If we start with the premise that an injustice happened to George Floyd, we then have to ask honest questions that look at people turning into a mob. Is that actually going to help anybody? Is that going to save or sanctify anyone becoming part of a mob? Because again, I really think there are bad actors in our world that are fanning the flames on this. And we have a lot of people virtue signaling, saying, oh, this is how they need to express their anger. We need to hear their voices. That's not breaking another commandment in response to one commandment being broken. Is not the biblical worldview on how the world moves to a better place. And if you're in the church and you're saying that it's okay for people to continually break commandments, that's you're fanning the flames on this. You're not being virtuous. You're doing something which is also sinful and evil. It's not sanctified behavior to say that unholy things are excusable just because it makes us feel good, because we want to feel like we're siding with people who are oppressed. That is uneven scales. What needs to happen, again, is people who have done things that are bad need to be held accountable. And don't conflate groups with individuals. I know it's very popular to do that. Jesus does not come to us and tell us that we conflate groups with individuals. I know we like to take individual stories and use them as anecdotes. It's very popular. Jesus tells us that always leads to chopping your head off like this. Using the metaphor of this game, these townspeople, they're made into these zombies because of something that was beyond their control. Something that an elite group of people was doing. And, okay, so they want to be zombies now. Does that make their lives good? Does having Leon come in here with his rather fashionable FN57 and smoke them, does that make this better? No. No, it doesn't. So there's that. So we'll move on beyond that. I kind of repeated that conversation twice. I also tried to put the live stream on multiple sites. If you want to hear the first edition of it, you can go back. And I also would love for some comments. But got this weapon out. It'd be great if they dropped some ammo. Also, how does he just waltz right over these little traps? You just don't. Oops. Okay. Let's take out the chainsaw guy. This is also, like, who has a maze crypt? What's going on here with this? It's kind of strange. But being made into a mob is as old as time. You know, it's actually a mob that kills Jesus. A lot of times we say the Apostles' Creed. You know, we talk about Pontius Pilate, which I'm not. Pontius Pilate certainly has. He's responsible for his actions. I'm not giving any pass or whitewashing Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate, he does not take up for Jesus even though he wants to release him. That being said, it's the mob that ultimately is screaming, "Crucify him," that both takes Jesus there and carries through with the crucifixion. Roman soldiers who are actually there, just doing what they're told to do, which again, not that, just doing what you're told to do doesn't remove guilt. You know, there's a lot of complex things going on in the world, even though there's moral certainty in there. There's moral certainty. You're responsible for your actions. Somebody told you to do evil, you're responsible for that. But the Roman soldiers who aren't part of the mob, there's several of them who say, "Oh, this guy was who he said he was. This was the Son of God. These Jewish people, this really is their Messiah. This is their God." You know, there's quite a few of them who make that realization. And it is very sad that we have so many people who forget that. Whew. And it's difficult to fight a mob. It's difficult in this game, and that's why it's an enemy in a game. Fighting a mob is difficult. You can't just wish that away. And once you start being possessed by it, it's bad. And it does work like a demonic possession, which is really sad. Which also reminds us that there's something deeper that has to be dealt with. It's not just the actions at hand, though those can't be excused. Again, you can't just ignore this. Unfortunately, roundhouse kicking in real life probably wouldn't solve the problem. In fact, I would doubt that. And I'm just gonna have to quit being so greedy with this stuff. So I found a lot of these character models that get reused because that's what a mob does to you. It makes you lose your unique individual traits that God gave you. To reload in this game, so many convoluted buttons. This really does have one of the more convoluted button schemes. I mean, it's not too bad. Most of the Resident Evil games I've played have a convoluted button scheme. Obviously, when this came out in 2005, GoldenEye, James Bond GoldenEye, had already been out, which should have been the start of a new template. Sure, when you go back and play GoldenEye now, it doesn't feel very refined, but it was going in the right direction. And a lot of the other James Bond games that came after it, the controls, you can pick them up and play them. Because they're very intuitive. It's just a good control system. So let's talk worldview of other things, and I might bring this back up in a later video. But I just started watching the Spider-Man series, which I've had several people recommend it to me. And when I'm talking Spider-Man series, I'm talking about the one from my childhood. that came out, I think it came out in 94, was its first airtime. And I've heard from several people that it's good in the same way that the Batman animated series is good. And even though it's a cartoon and it's not adult per se, it's something that adults can understand. The plots are more mature than just a kid's cartoon. And it's really designed for people of all ages to enjoy. And when I say the plots are mature, I don't mean that they're sexual or something like that, but they're more complex. And they address issues that adults would really understand. That's definitely true of the Spider-Man series as well. And it's extremely well written. And it's a lot more honest about the world than some newer things. Again, the justice ideologies that infect stuff, they ruin pretty much everything they touch because they're not telling the truth of the world, they're telling fantasies. Usually some sort of utopian fantasy. And rather than writing interesting characters, they write about superficial characteristics, which is very boring. You can pretty much, if you watch a movie that's been made in the last 20, 30 years, the female lead will be a version, I started to say a version of Laura Croft, but Laura Croft has more originality than a lot of these. It's the same. They have masculine traits. They're breaking all the stereotypes because they're basically Leon from this game, and they don't realize how much they have become a stereotype in breaking stereotypes. And generally, if there's a dad in it, it's gonna be a deadbeat. It's not gonna do anything. I mean, it's really boring tropes. I think a good example of how characters have changed from the 90s till now, and this actually even changed within the 90s, is Bane from Batman. And I'll get back to Spider-Man in a second, but Bane in the Batman cartoon, which is where he's introduced, like you see him, and there's this big, like, Mexican wrestler dude who's just huge and ripped. And you're like, dang, Bane's big. And then you find out that Bane hasn't even transformed into Bane. He's that big, and then he gets even bigger. Whereas now, you see Bane in this isn't the one that has Tom Hardy playing Bane, but the one, I think Uma Thurman was in it. I don't remember if Val Kilmer or George Clooney played Batman in the one that came in the 90s with Bane. I think it was Val Kilmer, but the 90s movie with Batman, the first time Bane appeared on the set, he was real strong dude, and then he got big. Like, they had to compensate and make him small in order for it to be significant that he was big, instead of going from one place and aspiring to something even higher. In our culture, turn the volume off on that. In our culture, we're not aspiring. We don't have the imagination. Everything's kind of the same. But the Spider-Man TV show actually is pretty good, and it's enjoyable to see how it addresses different themes, because Spider-Man really is a coming-of-age story of men. It's kind of a fairy tale of what it means to be a man. And I think as far as the live-action movies go, the first two of the live-action movies with, I guess, the Sam Raimi series, you could call it, they really are great. They do a lot better job than do the modern ones of portraying the real story of Spider-Man. And I know it's going to make a lot of people upset that like the MCU, but when the Tom Holland movies, when you've got Iron Man or somebody to like help you out and give you your suit, and especially in Spider-Man Homecoming, like, you've got somebody to get you a jet and take you around. You have all these people who know who your identity is. That's not as good. It's not as true to the character and really the archetype that Spider-Man's being as it is in the original live-action series. Because Spider-Man, he does have to keep a lot of stuff to himself. But we also live in a world where we're told that, like, you just need to have another debrief session and your life will be fine. But the original series shows, you have to make choices. You don't have somebody who can just come in and clean everything up. Sometimes you do have to live with your consequences. You have to rely on your instincts. There's stuff you've got to live with. You don't just get to be spoiled and have the luxuries of someone else cleaning up everything for you, coming in to give you a plane ride when you need it. You have to deal with things that affect you in your mind. You have to deal with temptations and things. And the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man series does a great job of illustrating that. With great power comes great responsibility. And that means that it's your power. It's not Tony Stark giving you access to the Avengers or him giving you all this stuff. It really is something in your own life. Oh. This is making for a bad live stream. But you have to be willing to rise to the occasion. You can't have, you can't rely on something to fill in the gaps. And even God, we don't make other people out to be God in our lives, and that's kind of what happens with the Tony Stark movies in Spider-Man's life. There's a lot of things that do exist between you and God, and you've got to sort that out. Every son of Adam and daughter of Eve is faced with the fact that with great power comes great responsibility, and that's just being created in the image of God. But the Spider-Man series, I've watched a few episodes of it. I watched up to the Hobgoblin, so just getting into season 1. I think the whole deal with Venom is done really well in there, because Venom really becomes sort of a Cain and Abel situation, where you've got two brothers, even though Eddie Brock is not actually his brother, but he's a bigger guy. They work in the same professions. They have the same social circles. They're both kind of alphas in their own right, though Eddie Brock, in a sense, is the larger alpha of the two. And it's very much like Cain and Abel. And Eddie Brock has no restraints, where Peter Parker does have restraint. And just as Cain did not show restraint, and he is theoretically the senior alpha of the two, being the older brother. But they're both kind of the same genetic potential, meant to actualize into something very similar. And you find that with Eddie Brock. And Cain, the older brother, kills Abel. And Venom wants to kill Spider-Man. And it really is a very, very interesting thing to watch. It's really, really well done. And the ultimate thing that defeats him, because Eddie Brock is kind of fully embraced the chaos, is something of order. Sound is fixed. It's part of the laws of creation. It's not something made in a lab somewhere. Eddie Brock, an agent of chaos, is stopped by something which is just fundamental to the world. It's interesting. And also, I knew that was kind of the angle that this was being portrayed when Eddie Brock, when he's telling Peter what it's like to become Venom, And Peter's already had the symbiote in, so he knows. He doesn't need to be told from Eddie Brock. But Eddie Brock's like, you know, when you embrace it, you're part of something which is as old as time itself. And again, it's sin. It's a sin nature that runs in all of us. Peter Parker could have become Venom. He could have become the monster. I mean, the monster Venom, it is a version of Spider-Man. It looks very similar to Spider-Man. We can all become Venom. If you let the carnal nature run unchecked, you'll become Venom. And it'll look similar to you, just a more contorted, nasty version of it. May actually be a little bit bigger, maybe a lot stronger. You know, Dr. No in the first Bond movie, the criminal mind is always superior. That's true. Not because they're smarter or wiser, but because they don't have to be restrained. They get to do whatever they want, whenever they want. They don't have a conscience. They don't hold themselves accountable to anything. So the Spider-Man show is really good. Really like it. It's been a very, very enjoyable show so far. And, oh, let me see if I can respond to this real quick. Y'all bear with me. Okay. So this hasn't been so much a successful playing of Resident Evil as much as it's been just a conversation on the world. But if you haven't seen the old Spider-Man TV show, do check it out. It's on Disney Plus right now. I know a lot of people got Disney Plus. I need to start reviewing stuff that people have access to. I've gotten into these old niche movies like Rope and, you know, the Hammer Horror series with Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee in it. And they're really hard to find. I've had to buy all the DVDs on eBay, and, you know, that's... I almost hate to recommend something to people that's so hard to get your hands on. And they're not super expensive. I mean, it can be. And you can rent them on Amazon, but they're like $3 and $4 a piece. And you can find the DVDs for that price on eBay. Usually they're not that price individually, but if you buy like a group of them or a lot, you can usually get it for $3, $4 a piece. It's like, why would I pay that to watch it once? And not be able to keep it. And another lesson we learned from the mob is that even though the cult, you know, they've obviously they've partaken of this too, because, you know, to be in a cult, you know, it's in the name. You're in the cult, so you're affected by the stuff that has been destructive. So, I mean, you're possessed by it too, though you're willingly possessed by it. I did like, though, in the Spider-Man, speaking of Venom, so obviously Venom is not only Cain and Abel, which Cain, he's kind of the first murderer. There's also a allegory within Spider-Man of sin. You know, Venom is an incarnation of, he's sin incarnate. He's the sinful version of Peter Parker. And of course, Peter Parker is, I mean, we're all sinners, so I'm not saying he's not a sinner. But Venom is the version of that which has fully embraced it. Like, he doesn't even want to try to be righteous. He doesn't even want to try to look to something bigger. He's just straight up 100% let's do evil. And never look back. He's sold his soul to the devil, as one might say. And done so happily. There's nothing down here. Oh. Staff of Royalty. And if we Let's see if this will open up. Okay. Oh, the skull. Take the handgun hammer. Yes. Wait, was there something hidden in that room that I missed? Let's see. Nope. This looks like a long cart ride or something. Since this game likes the weird carts and stuff. Oh. Let's see if we can. Alrighty, well, I've got some other things to pick up with, so I'm going to end the live stream there. And I hope that anyone listening to this has enjoyed the conversation. So we'll pick up with this later. Actually, we may pick up with it again tonight. I just need to make sure some other things are ready for tomorrow. And with that, everyone, don't get discouraged in life. There are things that are legitimately bad, but we don't get discouraged because we already have the victory through Christ our Lord. So with that, God love you, and have a blessed day.